Welcome back to the Native Stroke Show. I'm your host Richard Kuptang. This is the place where we discuss a lot of things, revolving around design, jobs, career, and also music. And for the past few months, we have not been able to update our podcast for certain reasons, like technical issues and then personal issues and so on. But here we are finally, and our guest today is Fela Chawngthu. Fela is currently with Adobe, and he is a father and loving husband as well. Fela, why don't you just, as a starter, go through us your current profile and then help us understand who you are and where you are right now?
Sure. Thank you, Richard, for having me at this podcast, Native Strokes Show. I love the name, by the way. So much. Happy to introduce myself. So as you said, I'm currently with Adobe and have been with Adobe for about 12 years now. That's quite long in contrast with the normal tenure that you see in corporate jobs. And I've worked with global technology companies like Oracle, Publicis Sapient, and HCL, an Indian player. That's where I started my career, actually. I have been around the Indian IT industry. And I did my education here in Delhi, in a college in SRCC, Sri Ram College of Commerce, and then an MBA from Delhi University, right? That has been my journey. So I've never really left Delhi since bachelor's. Like you, I really like this city, right? So from college to having two kids, one is almost a teenager now, 12. Mm-hmm. I've been here putting up in Vasant Kunj, quite close to the airport. For those of you who are not from Delhi, that's pretty much my background here.
Yeah, you told me that you're from Sri Ram College and you have done BCom, and then you move on to get a MBA. Have you ever? What was the tipping point that you are going to go into the public sector, whereas our typical our mentality of our community from the Northeast is always the public sector?
Oh yeah, sure. So I don't quite know why, but government jobs or this business, small businesses like the mom and pop shop never really intrigued me or attracted me, right? I couldn't just imagine myself sitting in a government office, suit and tie, and looking all serious all day long, right? That's just not me. And then if you look at the normal businesses that people get into in Mizoram or maybe elsewhere in the Northeast, right? It's pretty much what we call mom and pop shop. You have to sit in the store, customers come in, greet them. That also didn't quite intrigue me. I don't know why, right? And maybe that's God's plan. But when I did my graduation in Sri Ram College of Commerce, that was the time when the IT industry in India boomed, right? And we've never heard of IT really. Then suddenly you see these companies like TCS, Infosys, Wipro, HCL, and they were the talk of the town, and they really revolutionized the whole industry globally. And this was during the Y2K buck or boom, as they said, or the dot-com boom, right? Maybe many of the listeners are too young to know it. This was 1998, 99-ish, right? So I was greatly attracted or intrigued about that industry, which is booming. And all the newspapers everywhere, they were talking about the great prospects that India is into, right? So that was one reason why I wanted to be in the tech industry, right? And second, maybe thirdly, I would also associate much of my passion in the corporate to the influence of my brother. My brother actually is in the government, right? So he is an IAS officer, but he never really I think remotely, or maybe he think that the siblings and my eldest brother is also into government job. He's into teaching. He's a professor. Maybe they think that enough of the brothers in government jobs, and I must try out, right? So he was the one
Yeah.
who actually prompted me to take up MBA. It was called Masters in Business Economics when I did it, and it turned to MBA, right? So he actually filled up all my forms. So the industry development and the wave that was Indian IT, and then my brother and my kind of passion towards doing something else other than mom and pop shop and government jobs. I think that those three factors were the biggest influence.
And you mentioned about never interested about the mom and pop shop, or being a little bit more of an entrepreneur, or sitting idle in a government offices waiting for the work to be get done, something like that. Does this mean that you're more into the system of the corporate functioning, where everything is chop chop chop, you're the best of the best, you have to be competent, and if you're not good enough, you better find another place? Are you that kind of a person who thinks that kind of in that line?
Well, yes and no, right?
Yeah.
By the way, I kind of developed the likings for entrepreneurial kind of work very early on. But my definition of being an entrepreneur is very different, right? I think the small business, or let's say being a reseller or a distributor or opening a retail shop or being an agent, is what I would call business, normal business, mom and pop shop, right? Which families run,
Exactly.
or very organized. But real entrepreneur solve problems on a daily basis. So
Exactly.
the thing that drove me was, how do I take big challenges and solve those problems, right? And later I knew that was what entrepreneurial ship is. And also getting those problems solved through others is what they call management. So I learned all of those and said, okay, this is it, right? This is it. This is where I want to go. So, but in terms of being competitive, I don't think I'm overly competitive. But I like to learn, and I like to put my A game on, if you know what I mean, right? So
Yeah.
perhaps I had maybe a little bit of zeal and drive, which was maybe more than what normal jobs would satisfy, right? Maybe I'll put it at that, but I don't think I was at any point of time overly competitive or would like to do a rat race, as we call it, right? Yeah.
You mentioned, you've never been a really competitive. So how was growing up for you? Have you done all of your educations till before the colleges in Mizoram, or how did it happen? And how was childhood for you?
Yeah, interesting. So my dad is a pastor. That means you keep shifting, right? That's one of the that's one of the things. So I did part of my education in Aizawl in Mizoram, and then in Lunglei, which is the second capital, and then in Shillong. So I did my schoolings in three cities, and my Shillong school was army school, CBSE, and I think my dad and my brothers, they always wanted me to go to central India, right? Because they put me on CBSE. By the way, now everyone is doing CBSE, or
Yeah, exactly.
but that time it wasn't that, right? So I think it was only maybe 1-2% of the student would be doing CBSE. Maybe they had a really good vision, right? Thanks to my family, they put me on a CBSE at 12 in Shillong. Yeah.
Was it there any difference? A challenge in the transition between having to go from Lunglei to another place, and then to a CBSE board, and then from there to Delhi.
Well, maybe I didn't know it then, but I had to manage a lot of change, make new friends. In terms of studies, maybe this is not the time to brag or anything, but I was almost always towards the top of the class. So studies wise, I didn't have really any challenge. But yeah, maybe to come to think of it, I didn't realize it then, but there was a lot of change I had to manage. And in the corporate job, it's all change management, right? Every day it's
Exactly.
changing. So
That's where I want to come in,
yeah,
because I was trying to understand all these changes. How does it correlates to the current position where you are working in a corporate at a fast-moving pace of everything, and are you already prepared to do that? Because you have moved around a bit inside of the Northeast as well, and then you come to Delhi, which is a completely different ball game altogether, right? So in a way, do you think that you are actually preparing yourself for that?
yeah. I mean, it's interesting, and the way that you are analyzing that, I think it's quite profound, and maybe more than I realize. It did, right? So, I think I'm very comfortable with ambiguity, right? When things are unclear,
Yeah.
or you have to start afresh on something. I actually don't like something very stagnant, something that stays the same. I can't do something over and over again, right? I need to see
Yeah.
change. Maybe those are the things that prep me, right? And in terms of outlook as well, I met lots of new people with lots of different perspectives, lots of culture. In Shillong, since it was an army school, half the class would be from the army background, and the toppers, the best students were the Marwaris, and then the localites, the Khasis would join in. So it was kind of multicultural. And then in the corporate, you have to work well with anyone, right? So
Exactly.
it's up to you to work well. So that may have prepared me more than I could ever imagine. So great digging there, Richard, I must say. Yeah.
Yeah, and working in a corporate is not something that it's not for everyone, I would say. And one of the misconceptions that every Northeast people have is, especially our not our generation but our parents' generation, is that when we say it, as simply put, when you go back home, they will ask you where you work. Oh, it's you work in a company. It's the word company, or
Yeah. Yeah.
or that's what they refer to. So I want you to kind of try to explain in a short, simple way, how do we define what is a private sector, and for someone who never get into that kind of a career his structured, how do they get into that private sector industry? What is the entry point? What sort of diversity in terms of career options do they have? I mean, we already know that technology is the foundation for it, but if you can a little bit more elaborate on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I can give a really long answer to that, but I'll try and keep it short, right? So think about this, right? Think about public sector, which is anything owned or run or where major stake is with the government, like government jobs or PSUs, as we call it, public sector unit, like working for SBI, or all of that is called public sector, right? Anything owned privately, that means non-government owned enterprises or small business, are called private sector. So anything non-government is private sector to start with, right? Now, private sector would be huge, right? The shop next to you is a private sector, or let's
Yeah.
say Google is a private sector company. Now, within the private sector, you have to demarcate corporate and non-corporate, right? Corporate is companies who float their shares publicly. That means they register in stock market, their stocks is up for purchase. It's not owned by a single person or group of people. It's owned by whoever buys the share, but there'll be people who will be holding majority shares and so on. But these are to simplify this. Any big business institution or companies, as we call it, would be the corporate, right? And then we
Yeah.
have the private sector, privately held. That means there'll be a single or partnership ownership, and they don't register their stock in the stock exchange and trade publicly. That means it's privately held, right? Now I
Yeah.
represent the corporate job, which is big company job, right? So I have never worked in the privately held private sector, which are small businesses or organization. I always almost, I think, yeah, it's all publicly held big corporations that I've experienced in. So that's what I represent and can talk about. So I'm going to eliminate the privately held private sector and only focus on the corporate, right? So in the corporate, you can think about it, right? There are many industries. We call them industries. So firstly, let's say retail. I'll give you examples. Retail are people. Retail is an industry which engage in selling something to customers directly, right? So Big Bazaar is retail, right? Or Nike showroom, Marks and Spencers, all those are retail, into retail. And then you have banking and financial services. These are like HDFC, Kotak Mahindra, or Royal Bank of Scotland, or American Express, or whatever, right? And then so on and so forth. And then you have software and IT. And then you have FMCG company, fast moving consumer goods. These are like Hindustan Unilever is a good example, right? And so on and so forth, who makes things that you consume quickly, like biscuits, some food items, or let's say shampoo, all of that, right? And then you have consumer durables. These are like Samsung, LG. These are white goods that you can keep for some time, like fridge or a refrigerator or a TV, etc. Right? And then you have hospitality and travel and hospitality. This would be like Indigo, isn't it, to travel, right? Aviation. Hospitality would be like Taj. They have lots of hotels, right? So that's another industry. And then you have media and entertainment. Netflix. Google is a media company by and large, right? And then you have automobiles or automotive, however you want to call it. These are like Mahindra, right? Or let's say BMW. Those are into that. So within the corporate, there are many industries. The good thing is you can choose to work in the industries that you really like. And for example, Richard, you are into consulting and services, where you offer services, not goods, right? Where you do something for other companies or people who pay up. That's a really big industry, the consulting and services industry, right? So the good thing about corporate is there are lots and lots of industries, and you can actually choose to be in a sector or an industry where you have profound interest in. Like me, I'm always into technology, so I'm in the technology industry. If you really like the aviation industry, and then you're intrigued about how you handle complex flight system, etc., then you get into any Indigo or a Jet Airways or whatever, right? Oh, Jet Airways is no longer here, so maybe SpiceJet or whatever, right? So the corporate, as you have to understand it that way, and that will give you a very broad perspective, right? You can get into those, and there are very specialized ones. I can't name all of them. For example, DHL. They're into logistics, right? So there are companies, and then there's a big real estate company. DLF is into real estate, for example. So there are more that I can't possibly name all of them. Now, that's how you should understand the corporate world. To your question, how do you get into it? You have to specialize on some particular thing, right? And maybe let me take a couple of minutes on just the kind of specialization broadly. These are like very broadly, because I have to keep it short, that you can kind of build, the specialization that you can build to get into the corporate world, right? So one is this. Invariably, these corporates have a product or a service that they're selling. So we talked about, let's say, consumer durables. Like LG will have a TV or whatever, right? So if you know how to make the product that they sell, or there are services companies who offer services. For example, if you are very creative, if you know how to design something, you can have an agency, a creative agency, right? That can offer services to other companies. So if you know how to create or make the product that they're selling, you can get into manufacturing or services delivery, as we call it, right? And then mostly these are people who have specific talent, or engineers, or people who specialize in the manufacturing process, right? There are professional courses for all of it. So that's one area. The second area is how I started my career. It's marketing, right? So once they make the product, you have to decide how best to sell it, how best to position it. Position it means what kind of brand do you build, right? And how do you sell it, and to whom? And how do you create demand? Demand means people who can pay up. You generate interests and willingness to buy, right? It's very interesting. So you can get into marketing, which is awesome. And then next to creating demand is you have to actually sell it. And when you sell it, you have to manage that customer. It's called account management. So you can get into sales and account management. Here in marketing, either you're extremely creative and really good, or you get a professional degree like MBA or some type of product knowledge where you can really create demand, right? So engineering is always a good background. MBA is a good background. Creative writing skills, copywriting, all of those are good backgrounds, right? In sales and account management, this is a job that everyone is qualified, but you have to be sort of gifted. I have a sales team right now, and I'm into sales as well. This is where your interpersonal skills needs to be extremely good. These are the people who wear ties and dress up really well to do business, right? So, and there's a little bit of risk involved here as well. So you have to be good with numbers and execution, and being able to stomach a bit of risks, right? And then there are these are front office job who face customers, and there are back office job who never meets customers, right? You get into operations where you look after the day-to-day activities of the company. And then there's HR, human resource. You employ lots of people. You have to pay them. You have to look after them. You have to define the reward system, and how do you get the best out of them and grow them and make them successful, right? That's HR, human resource department. For this, there are professional courses, but I think people who are good with people, right? They can get into it. And then you have finance, where you have to be, let's say, a CA or MBA in finance, or BCom or MCom. I think finance, there are specific things. There's financial management as well as there's accounting, right? So you can get into those. These are typically for people who are good in maths and numbers. And there are small departments like legal, where lawyers are hired. And then there's let's say transport, or there are legal counsel who are sort of advising on different legal. I've mentioned legal. And there are, I think, M&A expert. For example, companies buy companies and so on. So there are small pockets. Now, I've set lots of roles, right? The thing is, one confusion and the myth that I want to debunk is in that different roles, there's operations. Within that operations, where you run day-to-day activities, you outsource some of your operations. This is called BPO, business process outsourcing, right? The corporate that we know in Mizoram or in the Northeast is that BPO, that outsourcing. That is a very small part, right? It's only that India is cheaper than other companies. Therefore, we get lots of outsourcing jobs, but this is a very small part of corporate. I think there's a good career to be made here. It's a really good job as well, but I just want to call out, that's not the whole of the corporate, right? So when I go back home, Richard, what people ask me is, do you do night shift? Well, do you sleep well? Do they pay you, etc., right? So, but that's one of the myth that we need to debunk here as
But
well.
do they
Yeah.
actually pay you well?
That's for another
That's a
podcast.
$1 million. That's a $1 million questions, by the way.
Exactly. So
It's
I've been going on and on, Richard. Now stop me
the-
and see if
no,
I'm making sense.
that's
Yeah.
good, because that's something that we wanted to do, right? I mean, try to debunk as much as we can, and let people see and be inspired by, at least if we can even inspire one person to say that, oh, this is really interesting, I should look it up. We already win. That's what I'm trying to say.
Great.
Because from my understanding is that yes, government job as a whole, any job is not bad, but the thing is that the government job right now will not be able to suffice the requirement that we have for all of us. And if that's the case, then how do we go for the secondary route? How do we make a living out of whatever is available, right? And with that, one of the question that I have is dignity in workplace. Do we have that as a Northeastern? Do we have that? Do you think we have that? Or is that something that we need to build upon?
Yeah. So I will put it in a slightly different way, right? So to be successful in the corporate job, like you said, rightly said, it's slightly competitive, slightly entrepreneurial. You have to know how to solve a problem and work with others. Now, as you deal with a lot of people, you have to develop two things. One is IQ, which is the innate ability to think, right? The intelligence, and this. There's a lot of debate on whether you can build it over time or is it set from childhood. I'm not here to debate, but you have to know your ability a little bit, right? So that you know. So I'm not into finance because I know I don't have the IQ to do, even if I have, I'm too bored to bury myself in accounting books, right? So you have to know your weakness a little bit and your intelligence level, number one, but which I think almost all Northeasterners are good. The second part is where we need to build, which is EQ. IQ is very important. The other part, which is maybe even more important now, and the psychologists and neuroscience experts will agree with me, EQ, which stands for emotional quotient, or they simply say emotional intelligence, is extremely important in your success. And this is what Northeasterners thoroughly lack, right? Which is being self-aware, knowing how to work well with people, knowing how to contain your emotion, right? If you're angry, you have to know how to digest it and not come in your way of being productive or hampering the way that you work with people, or let's say even fear, right? We have a lot of fear, and people are amazed about the confidence that me and some of my Northeasterners friends in corporate have. And they used to call us, they used to tell us that you have lots of courage. Well, it's needed, right? So managing fear, anxiety, all of that. And you have to be able to take a little bit of pressure, right? In government, go to the office, do a bad job, go home, nothing happens. Go to the office, do a really good job, nothing happens. In the corporate, you have to put your A game, which is always perform and always be a joy to work with. That sense of awareness in terms of emotional controls and so on, and control your emotions from anger to fear, etc., right? And managing your boss, that's extremely important. You have to be very smart and very quickly in the corporate. Many Northeasterners,
I think it's called managing upward and downward, right?
exactly. You have to know how to manage up and down. And many Northeasterners, I've seen them fail. And they have really good qualification. I think they've come back from with foreign degrees. They graduate from IIMs and so on, but they don't last in the corporate because they just couldn't develop the EQ necessary to be successful.
Just want to interject here that do you think that's because we have so much of, how do I put it forward in a nice way, but do you think that's because of our ego that
Well, to be truthful, yes, it's because of our ego and a little bit of inexperience, right? Because there's no grandfather or father or parents who can teach us this. We spoil our kids there, right? And this is a really enjoyable parenting, but maybe not very good for entrepreneurs or people in the corporate. And we will develop it over time. I have no
yeah.
doubt. We are very young in terms of our experience. See, if you look at, let's say, the Gujaratis, the Maruars, or the business community, they don't pamper their kids. They're quite tough on their kids, and that builds them up for business, right? So I think if the next generation arrives, we'll learn EQ. I've seen changes. I hang around with my nephews and friends of my kids. I think they're much more emotionally developed than us right now.
Yeah, and I think the today's kids, even in our community, I think they are started to ask the right question, right?
Yep.
Which we never thought of asking in our childhood. And to be honest, I think we are the first generation of private sector working class, I would say, if I'm not mistaken, because our father generation have never been part of that. So, I think we do pretty much well in terms of being the first generation, and as compared to other people in the community, like for example the Punjabi or the North Indian people who are long way down the line in generation in terms of working in the private sector, right? So, and one of the question that I have is, as a Northeastern, we haven't been able to see people on the top as of yet. We know we have seen some here and there, but like for example in a Fortune 500 companies, or or at least in a Fortune 1000 companies, we haven't been able to see that much. What do you think is the barrier there?
Very good question. Very good question. So, I think firstly, it's just a number game as well, right? People
Yeah,
in the corporate are lesser, so the likeliness of seeing people high up, the chances are lesser. Statistics, right? Probability.
yeah,
Yeah.
statistic, yeah, yeah.
So that's one. The second thing is, I think that it takes a lot to get high up there. I think till
Exactly.
mid management, we all have a shot, and then it becomes a matter of choice as well, right? So, for example, we are very family oriented, but something's got to take. Something's got to give if you want to
Yeah.
navigate the corporate ladder. Sometimes we choose not to venture out so much, and we have reached a ceiling where maybe it's fine not to grow anymore. Let me set up my tent here, kind of a thing, right? That
Yeah,
could
yeah.
be the second reason. And the third reason is it's hugely competitive, and maybe we don't have that amount of exposure that others have. For example, uh, my boss, for example, the guy who hired me in Adobe, he has a foreign degree, for example, right? And the person who's heading our team is from Harvard, for example. And there are very few people who graduate from Ivy Leagues from the Northeast. It's not to say that you need to finish your degree in Ivy League to be the head, but the chances are bigger if you do that, right?
Yeah.
So, but amazingly, I would say we make a very good. Some of the Northeasterners I know, they make very good what we call individual contributors, right? So you start as an individual contributor, and then when you are really really good at doing certain things, then they let you manage. That is the management layer. You become a manager, and you oversee 4, 5, 6 people who does that same job, and you coach and do that. And then they give you, let's say, 10 people more, then you become a senior manager, and so on and so forth. You go up. And I'm a director right now, so I have like 140 people, right? So you have to keep being really good at what you do, and then you have to know how to think about strategy. Getting things done isn't enough. You have to think about the future, right? And then after that, you have to know how to give really sound advice everywhere. You have to know how to face your customers, etc., etc. So it gets really complex, and I think we are still learning as Northeasterners those variables that you have to master, right?
Yeah, I agree. And for example, the C-suite, which is let's not even go to the board. That's too far away. Even the C-suite, it's difficult because if I have interact with a lot of people, and what I see is that there are a lot of sacrifice that you have to make.
Yep.
And we Northeastern most of the people are family oriented people, which is not bad, right? It's not wrong to be family oriented. But when you have to decide between burning the midnight or staying all night in the office and then trying to figure out a problem and trying to find a solution, we always choose to tuck into the warm, cozy bed. That's what we are.
Yep.
And that's what I think that's what is one thing that is holding us back. But again, on the contrary, with the pandemic and everything, and there's mass resignation happening in the US, people are trying to evaluate, is it really, really worth doing that? So I want to come back to you and say that, can we have both of best world from, being a family-oriented people and then also being the best at what you do, and then give your 100% best in the job that you do, and still have the opportunity to reach there? Is this something the world is moving towards to, or do you think you have another answers to that?
Yeah, sure. So I'll give you 3 points, right? And this is something that I often think about, right? So firstly, I think we have much lesser people who would like to go all the way to the top in the corporate.
Exactly.
Right? I have friends all over the globe, right? Maybe Europe, US, or in the India office, who, even if you offer them a C-suite role, will reject it.
Exactly.
Because they don't want to go there. They want to stay somewhere, maybe at a VP level or director level, and that's about it, right? And that's a really smart choice, right? Exactly. I think there are more and more people like that. And secondly, the sort of the whole thing around the tenure of a C-suite level people are very short, right? A CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, their average tenure is about 2 years. That's it. CEO, based on the industry, some are 5 years, some are even 1 year, right? So it's a one-time kind of a thing, right? And the responsibility is huge. So I believe that it's not everyone's cup of tea, right? So and people know it, and that's one of the thing that people also rule themselves out completely. But here is the good news. There are companies, especially companies that I know well, who are really, really, really good employers. It's just the best place to work on earth, right? Think about any job. Adobe is one of them, who are always voted as one of the best places to work, and I'm extremely lucky to be a part of it. Like Google, right? Microsoft, and so on and so forth. These companies are a really good place to work. They offer a lot of support. I'll give you an example. During the COVID, one Friday in a month is holiday for Adobe, just like that, just to relax. And we have sabbatical every 5 years. We can go on 1 month unpaid leave, right? And the company really takes care of you. If you're sick, you have
Yeah.
unlimited leaves, etc. So things are changing, and things are changing for the C level as well. It's not as grinding in these companies to be at the C level than before. But I must say, if you are in, let's say, an investment companies, financial services, AMU, as we call it, asset management unit, or let's say in FMCG, yeah, you have to grind it, right? You have to hustle.
Exactly.
No weekend. You will be amazed. In my 12 years in Adobe, there'll be 1 or 2 weekends that I work, but never ever work on weekends, right? And I can always fly back when I travel. I can always fly back to my family on a Saturday. So we have those policies that are really good, but it's just developing, right? So
And it's developing in favor of the working class group,
exactly.
right?
So
Yeah.
it will not be as taxing as before to be at the C level or to lead, right? And it is not as taxing on you or your family to be in the corporate as before, because they really take care of you. See, with the great resignation, it's also happening in India, by the way. People are
Yeah,
resigning and enjoying their pensions earlier than before, and doing something else, living a cushy life in the farm, etc. So the companies are very expensive to the company to lose. So they do all that they can to keep you. And companies, corporation, right? It's not owned by anyone. It's owned publicly. So what they do is they change their HR policies very quickly to suit you, to attract the best talent. So if you're the best talent, the stress level is hugely lifted, right? And it's sort of changing very rapidly. So I think it will be very, very enjoyable, let's say in the next 10 years, even more so than now, to be in the corporate.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, with the pandemic, one of the things that I see as a trend is that the company is rolling out. Every company is rolling out offer. They are searching for talents, and there is sort of talent in the market. And people who are good, they are asking, let's say, 80% hike.
Yeah.
Not even 100. I mean, some people go as far as saying that I want 100% hike, which is as compared to, for example, you working as a LDC in a public sector, which is a completely different thing, right? You have the upper hand to negotiate your own salary. How much that is being taxed, how much that is being being diverted, that's a different story. But you have the upper hand to negotiate on that. I think that's a good part. If you're ambitious enough, that's a good part to take up. And talking about workforce and the talent that we see right now, I've been a hiring manager for some time now, and in my previous role as well, and then prior to that as well. And what I see is that there is a discrepancy in people mentioning that, okay, I have a year of experience in this much, right? And for example, somebody will come with their resume saying that, okay, I have 10 years of experience, but in ground reality, that 10 year of experience doesn't correlate to what they can do, right? Which I think in Northeast, when it comes to Northeast community, I think that rarely happens. We exceeded our year of experience. That's something that I see. And can't we that bank on that particular ideas that, okay, we are doing much better than that, and then capitalize on that and try to swing through it. But I don't know how we can do it. But you may have a you've been running the show for a long time now, so you have a good idea. Okay, I'm seeing this person. This is how he react. This is what his resume say. I already know that he's going to be like this. So you might have a fair understanding of the insights, although not giving out completely. But if you want to add something to that.
Oh well, maybe I'll add in a slightly different perspective, and
Mm,
maybe which can benefit the audience, right?
mm,
So I think the Northeasterners, as I understand it, will do really well in anything to do with creativity, right? We have an
yeah.
edge. So things to do with designing or something that is really big in product design these days is design thinking, where you have to
Mm,
empathize and solve problems. Or some there are some people who are really developed in socializing and making
mm,
relationships, right? I think they'll make a really good sort of a service team or even sales and account management, right? Because you
mm,
have to do things based on trust and you have to advise. And I also think that we adopt to change really quickly, and we can
yeah.
catch change very early. People who have an analytical mindset and are from the Northeast will be really good at research, for example,
Mm,
right? I think we have a lot of edge that we can, like you said, we can provide more than what is written in a resume. Are
mm,
those things, right? Or
yeah.
content. Content is huge. Content writing, content
Exactly.
creation. I think in the Northeast we have the best content people. They just don't know it yet, right?
Mm,
And also, I would go as far as saying some of the people who are really good communicators in the Northeast, I've seen some of them,
mm,
can really be successful in some type of customer interfacing role, or maybe being
PR and stuff like
yeah,
that.
an influencer like product manager, right, who
Mm,
often
mm,
speak in
mm,
public. I think they
mm,
can do those roles really well, right? And I'd be excited
mm,
to think through this with anyone who needs advice, right? I think we have an USP, unique selling point, on that
mm,
regard.
mm. Yeah, and coming back to the first few questions that we talked about, like specialization. In order to enter the market, you need specialization. Is this something that you can develop along the way?
100%. And so let me tell you a little bit about, let's exit India, because in India the hiring
Hmm.
market is very driven by educational background. Can you do it? Can you do
Exactly,
that?
exactly.
But it's changing. The startup
Hmm.
culture, which is huge, by the way. There are so many successful
Hmm.
startups, right? Zomato, I can Nika, Paytm, blah blah blah. So many successful startups now. Freshworks, for example, who
Hmm.
listed in New York, they're changing that sort of the lens with which they hire. But let's go to the US, right?
Hmm.
If you really people who are doing MBA or getting into corporate, they have work experience beforehand. Okay, so
Hmm.
the way to learn and pick up those skills and to be the best in whatever you do is to learn by doing. Now, this is where we maybe often lack as well. Is you have to pick up a job, paying or not paying, right? And then you learn through
Hmm.
it. And that is going to be the biggest source of education. Now, let's say you want to figure out how retail is done. Go work in Big
Hmm.
Bazaar or in the mall somewhere for 1 year. You will learn a lot. And that learning is not even taught at Harvard or Oxford, right? You can pick up
Hmm.
learning by doing. Now you have to work on maybe a slightly low paying job to learn things. If
Hmm.
people do that, and then maybe couple that with some let's make a belief that they want to do some kind of education in India, and you couple that with that, and I think you can have a very compelling skill set, right? And specialization, as we
Hmm.
speak about, and go there. Now the thing is, in the North is people think that your first job is going to be your job forever. That's another thing which is extremely misleading. When I
Yeah, yeah.
started, I was a researcher, right? I was a management trainee, a researcher. My monthly salary was around 15,000. That's it. But you have to start from somewhere, right? So don't hesitate to pick on.
I start with 3,000.
Oh yeah, see where you are, right? So that's what it is. You have to start low, but that's your start, not your ending.
Exactly.
And there's nothing that's stopping you. You can jump higher and higher and higher and higher, right? So that's what you need to do. So building your specialization, I think one is really good education, or you have to hustle, right? You have to hustle.
Hustle,
Yeah,
hustle, and also have a long-term strategy, right? Where
exactly.
you want to
Long-term
be.
strategy. Start here,
And
but don't end here. Keep growing, right? You have to push yourself to grow. Yeah.
because one of the things that I understand is that before you enter the market, before you enter the corporate job, you barely know what is in store for you,
Yep.
right? The moment you enter it, you are, you started to learn. And then one of the things that I liked about the corporate is that if you are ever interested in some particular line, which is not the line that you entered for, then the company is willing to help you
100%.
and then
Yeah.
train you on that.
Yeah.
So you're getting trained without spending money, your own money. So that's the best part.
Yeah, they will educate you, and they'll spend a lot of money on you, the corporate, to develop you, because
Exactly.
it's smarter to train people than hire someone already trained in a very expensive salary. So it makes sense, and every company offers now really great learning opportunities. Yeah, that's one of the plus point on corporate. If you want to learn the best and the latest and the greatest, right? Right now, for
Yeah.
example, my team is working on AI. We are talking about metaverse, right? We're talking about big data analytics. We are talking about IoT, right? If I
Yeah. Yeah.
was some officer in the government, I don't think I'll be.
You'll just read about it.
Yeah, exactly. So if you want to learn the latest and greatest and work with the best of the best, that's what corporate offers you.
Yeah, and for the viewer, if you have any questions on some of the things that we talked about, you can always hit up Fela on his LinkedIn, and he'll be able to help you out. And we really want people to ask question on the comment section or wherever you're listening to, whether you're from Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to. You can always also come to YouTube and then see, join the discussion on the comment section. And Umafel, before we end the show, one of the things that I want to ask you as a closer is, do you think the workforce will slowly move from India to elsewhere, for example, the Philippines or Thailand or somewhere else? Because as far as I see, Philippines is slowly growing up the MNC community there. And if that happen, can it also move to the Northeast region? And if no, why can't it move there?
Yeah. So I'll answer your question in two parts, right? One is the corporate jobs moving elsewhere, like Philippines and so on. I think some work will go there, right? And it's moving. We ourselves are moving some work out, right? Including China, some in Mexico, etc., Dublin. However, right now, India is sort of pretty much the epicenter of hiring and setting up and doing business. And the government has done a great job in welcoming businesses, as well as the ease of doing business in India has improved quite significantly, and the talent market is just crazy. It's the best in the world right now. Okay, in terms of cost parity and so on and so forth. And if you look at our industry, the tech industry where I'm in, many CEOs, name it, Google,
Yeah, all
Twitter,
the CEOs,
Adobe,
right?
all are Indians, and lots of VPs and senior people, as well as starters. And we have the best engineers in the world. So for higher and critical end jobs, I think India is here to stay, right? Or rather, the jobs are here to stay in India, and India will be winning for at least the next 10, 20 years, definitely. But some maybe slightly lower in work will go elsewhere where it's cheaper, right? And of course, I think in Northeast, I also feel that there'll be good amount of potential. Many of the corporates are also exploring places like Tripura, and maybe not really northeast, but nearby in parts of West Bengal, closer to Assam, right, and so on and so forth. But that won't be the highest end of jobs, right? Let me be completely honest and open. And I will also encourage people from the Northeast to leave Northeast, right? That's the best learning. The best human capital development that can ever happen for the Northeast is if you leave Northeast, work somewhere else. If you want to go back, no problem at all. But leave home to learn and develop yourself, right? And go very far. For me, I think I set limits on my career. For the time being, I want to limit myself to, let's say, Delhi, India. But many of you can go farther, right? Go to the US, go to Europe. There's so much potential and opportunities, right? So I would, while I think that we can get some type of work done in the Northeast, I don't think that's the utopia for us. The utopia is for us to go out and learn and maybe move back and set up the business, etc., etc.